So a good mate of mine reaches out to me last week and asked me, is the rumour true that I've bought myself another boat? But yes it is, because I've just recently sold my tinny. So he said, your tinny, I thought you had a centre console. I said, yeah, I had a centre console, but I sold that too. So he said, what have you got now? I said, well, I ended up buying myself a 4.5 metre runabout, Quintrex. Why did you do that? And it's just a long story, long explanation. So what's inspired me to make this short episode is to take you through the journey of my first boat some nearly 30 years ago to this one now, which is a 4.5 metre Quintrex runabout.
What I do when I'm out, so try not to hold me down, feel alive.
Just as an FYI, this is my maiden voyage on the little Quintrex, the little runabout. So I'm probably 300 metres into it and it's singing like a bird, which is a nice thing. The motor's only done 50 odd hours. The original owner, or the owner that I bought it from, had it since 2019. Had the motor repowered 50 hours ago and maintained by the same boat mechanic that looked after my last 3 or 4 boats, which is Bravo Marine.
Look at these beautiful stars, I want to drive a faster car. Lay my troubles to rest, blow the smoke through my cigarette. City lights looking fine, and I know this is my time now. I'm gonna be myself.
So I've got a bit of a plan. I've just tonked up to East Perth. We've got a sou'wester blowing, so I'm hoping it's going to blow me back towards Maylands as I drift to eventually pull the boat back out of the water, because as I mentioned, today's its maiden voyage under the new ownership of myself and my beautiful wife. So how did all this journey start? Oh, well, I'm not going to go back the whole way, or maybe I should. Yeah, maybe I should, because my boating addiction started with my first boat, and I'm going to say it was 25 to 30 years ago. I can't remember exactly. 5.9 Vagabond, or a Seafarer, and then from there I probably had that for 18 months and bought a brand new Commodore All-Rounder, which is a 22 footer, which is a Perth manufactured boat. I don't think they're in business anymore. And then for whatever reason I sold that and bought myself an old Savage Lancer. I got seduced by a beautiful old boat that had been refurbished. After the Savage Lancer, I went looking for a Mustang, 34 foot wide body Mustang. Found one, fell in love with them many years before I ended up buying and finding the boat. Had that, good 7-8 years, had a lot of fun on it. Now all these boats could go to Rottnest Island, which was a prerequisite, and we also wanted to be able to camp on these boats. So it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. The Mustang was costing a lot of money to maintain because of one reason or another, but also just keeping a bigger boat in a pen is very costly. So the decision was made to sell the Mustang and cash out and make a decision from there. Didn't take long before I found myself a 5.9 metre custom centre console, which I guess doubled up as a bow rider. And the theory was big enough to go to Rotto, small enough to have fun on the river, small enough to tow up north, maybe get myself into a hobby like fishing, which I thought was going to be a lot of fun, and it has been, and had the centre console for, I'm going to say, a good 5 or 6 years. So we've had a lot of fun with the centre console. We've been up north 2 or 3, 4 times with it, and along this journey of boating we also start thinking about semi-retirement. and we land on Canavan, and that's a whole nother story which I'm going to save for another episode. Why Canavan? However, so we land on Canavan, and what we learnt with buying a property in Canavan is your options are wide and varied. You can go deep sea fishing, offshore, out to the islands. You can go north to Coral Bay and to Exmouth and fish and enjoy the Gulfs and the Ningaloo Reef. You can go south. You can go south from Canavan and end up in Shark Bay or Denham, and again, all the Gulfs. So I thought it a good idea to buy myself a small tinny that we could enjoy the more shallow grounds around Coral Bay, Canavan, Denham, and then keep the centre console for the bigger trips. You know, and also if you wanted to go back out to the Dampier archipelagos, up off Karratha, the tinny was clearly not going to do that, so the decision was made to keep the centre console and buy a tinny as a secondary, but the tinny needed to be small enough to use as a roof topper when the time came. So a fair bit of thought went into this. However, the last trip up north, I'm going to give you two examples or two scenarios which made us decide to sell the centre console, which, it's with full disclosure, I had an awful lot of seller's remorse. Anyway, so last trip up north, the first place we had really good experience was Coral Bay, and we caught as many spangled emperor and as many fish as we wanted inshore. Like, we didn't have to go even outside the reef. So that sort of triggered a thought process in our head that maybe we actually don't need this centre console after all, because the kind of fishing and the kind of boating we like to do is safe as we get older. Anyway, we leave Coral Bay and we end up at Onslow. So I was given some really good marks to catch really good fish. About 20 k's off the back of Thevenard Island, which is back of the envelope, 40 k's off mainland. So watching the weather off Onslow, we had some pretty shitful days where we couldn't get out on the water. However, there was one particular day where the weather gods were smiling on us, and we took it upon ourselves to get up at daybreak and go out the back of Thevenard and check out these spots. Well, as it turns out, probably half an hour after, maybe an hour after we got to these spots, remember this is 40 k's off the mainland, the weather changed and the weather blew up from the east, and it blew up. It was supposed to be 5 to 10 knots all day. Well, I can tell you that when we turned to come back to Onslow from the back of Thevenard, it was all of 25, 30 knots, and the wind was on the nose of the boat, and we just got belted. Like, this took us 3.5 hours to get back. Fair to say, when we got back to Onslow proper, or the marina, we looked at each other and we said, that's not much fun. So we were pretty battered and bruised at Onslow in this centre console, and we're probably 3 or 4 days out before we go further north to Karratha, which we wanted to go and explore the Dampier archipelagos a bit more. And again, I'd been given some more fishing spots and lined up to go fishing with a local up there who said to me with a fair bit of confidence, I'm going to take you some spots and we're going to catch some coral trout, we're going to catch some really good fish. But it's about 35 k's west of Dampier. So again, we go 35 k's out, weather's perfect. We went out and the water was just like glass. And we didn't catch a fish. That's a lie. We caught a few fish, but not the coral trout. And when we turned to come back in, the weather got a bit average, and we got to the boat ramp and we had to wait in line to actually pull our boat up for about an hour and a half, and we were just cranky. We were sore, we were battered and bruised. And by the time we actually put the boat back on the trailer, we basically said, you know, this boating and fishing's got knobs on it. And we were really turned off. But of course, that was only for a fleeting moment. However, the bruises and the aches and pains stayed for a bit longer. So we finished our trip up north. We're on our way back after Karajini and we're talking in the car. And we decided on the way back that we don't need the centre console. We are just gonna fish and enjoy the inner side of the reef when we go up north. Coral Bay, the tinny's gonna be fine. We talked ourselves into that. So when we got back to Perth, I put this centre console on the market and sold it in less than a week. The bloke that bought it was stoked. It's exactly what he'd been looking for. So now I'm left with a tinny, which I'm really happy with at this stage. However, the experience that I had as a 59-year-old up at Shelter Bay was not conducive to safe boating, so to speak. I'm north of 90 kilos, and if you've watched the vid, my mate is north of 120 kilos. He's 6'4". Long story short, we capsized this tinny and I lost about $3,000 worth of fishing gear, much to the disgust of both myself and my wife. Anyway, we dodged the bullet with the tinny and none of us got hurt. However, what it sort of reiterated is that if the weather's not perfect, irrespective of your fishing inside the gulfs or inside the reefs, the tinny's not an all-rounder type of option. So we get back to Perth with the tinny. I've pretty much in my own mind decided to sell it, and chatting to my boat mechanic, who I trust his opinion implicitly, he looked at me and he turned his head and he said, "Paul, why don't you just get yourself a runabout?" And a runabout at the right size, you can fish 20 k's offshore as long as the weather's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can still beach launch it. It really will be your all-rounder. And where you're living in Canavan, it's probably going to be your best option. So with that bit of advice, I went home and I chatted to my wife about it. And I thought about putting the tinny on the market. However, I rang Will, the mechanic, and I said, "Mate, look, just keep your ear to the ground for me." And about 2 weeks later, he rings me and he says, "Mate, do I have a deal for you?" And it's pretty much what the boat I'm sitting in now. 4.5 metre Quintrex Escape. It's what they call a runabout. It's been repowered. I'm going to put a new sounder on it. It's 500 kilos on a trailer, lighter than the centre console. It can still do everything that the console could do for us, other than probably go out 40 k's, but as I've shared, that ain't going to happen again. So that's the journey. That's how I ended up here. And that's my journey with all the boats that I guess I've had. As I mentioned, I've got a fair bit of seller's remorse from that centre console because safe boat. I knew it mechanically because I repowered it. Yeah, first day out on the water with this thing, I think it's going to work out perfect. But I've said that before. Bye for now.
I just wanna feel alive. It's just what I do when I'm out, so try not to hold me down. Feel alive.